So I went to AAA, and I'm like 25 at the time. I go to AAA to get a map. I'm going to drive cross country by myself. I would never think to do that now. But back then, that seemed like that was the way I could remap my life. Literally, in AAA, they pull out a map, they take a highlighter, and they map out my route. And at the last minute, I heard from a friend of a friend that their friend was also doing the same thing at the same time. She was living in Boston. She was from Iceland, but she wanted to go to San Francisco. She had different reasons. I don't even remember what they were. But we had separate cars, and this was before cell phones. Somehow we made it to California together. That's a long story. That would be another whole webinar. But my point about this is that in my search, that's not how things changed for me. Things changed when I actually stopped searching. So, and I have to say that, thank heavens for Sid Banks for what he uncovered. Thank heavens, because even when I first heard Sid, I was a real skeptic. And I thought, well, and I read Second Chance, and I thought, well, nice story, but over the top, went way over my head. I did not get any philosophy of life from it. I just got nice story. And luckily, I heard people like Bill Pettit say things like, well, you got to read that story again. And maybe even again, and maybe even again. And I'll tell you, with each reading, I saw more and I uncovered more. And I stopped searching and trying to remap my life and trying to change things and do things. So what I reflected on remapping my life, I saw it as it's not a doing. It's remapping, to a lot of people who have not been, or maybe anybody who's not been exposed to the three principles, may come on this webinar and think that I'm going to give them instructions on, 7 habits to follow or 3 principles to follow. And lucky for us, we're in this conversation about the 3 principles, not as things to do or things to follow, but as understanding, having an understanding of how these principles work to give us an experience of life in every single moment. They're already working within us. It's not something we turn on. It's not something we do. It's not something we follow. It's something to understand how it works, how we get this inside out view of life. And I'll tell you, I've been around this for 30 plus years. Bill Pettit reminded me, because I'm taking his course, and he reminded me that we met 35 years ago in Florida, the only place that was offering any kind of training at that time, the best of what people heard from Sid. And everyone was trying to find a way to share what they were seeing. But they were also, back then in 1985, and Sid, in the kindest way possible, pointed us in the direction of spirit, formless spiritual energy. That's what the 3 principles bring forth through us, through the power of thought. And that's the missing link in the world. People are looking at how to change their thinking, how to change their experience. but that's outside in. It's looking in the wrong direction. You want to like turn your eyeballs around. And that's what changes everything. That remaps life. I mean, essentially, I have the same, I don't know how to express this, but I'm the same person with the same kinds of things in the world. It's not about changing location, which is what I thought, well, if I change my location, that'll remap my life. If I change my job, that will remap my life. If I find a better boss, that will remap my life. None of those things, even though all of those things happen, but none of those things remap my life. The remapping took place when I stopped trying to change things. And what I heard from Sid was to look at what is, to appreciate. This is how I translated it. You know, this is how I heard what Sid said. To see and be grateful for what is. Because whenever I was expecting something different or something that what I thought of as better, I would like be slam dunked. I don't know if you know that saying. I think, yeah. Yeah, that's a saying not just in America, but also in other parts of the world, in the UK, and interesting. So, yeah, when I went after things to make things happen, even after I got wind of what was going on in the Three Principles world, for instance, I knew about Modelo. Some listeners have read Modelo. It's a book that Jack Pransky read about the Modelo housing project. And Lloyd Fields, who was a social worker, you know, during that transformation of that community project that took place in a lower income housing project. And so later, after I'm back in Connecticut, this is like in '94, I'm back in Connecticut, and Lloyd was in New York. So Lloyd comes out to Connecticut, and we're going to start a community rehabilitation project in Hartford, Connecticut, which could really use some help. So literally, like, you know, Lloyd and I, if we run into each other, that's happened, I think, only once at a conference since then, we'll laugh because we were literally running on the streets of Hartford trying to catch up with the resident, you know, the resident manager or director. She was the director of the program. And we'd get to one place and the people there would say, oh, she just left. She went over here. And we'd run through the streets to find her over there. And at some point we realized, what are we doing? If this was a project for us to be involved in, it would not be this difficult. And that's what I found throughout life. I mean, you know, this is crazy because I have either co-authored or authored 3 books now. I never had that on my to-do list. That was never, ever something that I had any interest in tackling. All 3 of those books landed on my lap. And it was one of those, you know, it was a project like, okay, you know, I feel like a servant of mind. Okay, with a capital M. You know, this is here for me to do. And I'm the scribe. I'll take care of it. And that's been like miraculous for me in my life to like get off of being on my back, being on my own back, trying to run the show. And I'll tell you, that was my first insight. And I didn't even realize it until after the fact. I had a huge effect from whatever Sid was talking about, which is always the same thing. We're taking this formless energy and we're bringing it into the world of form through our ability to think. It's an amazing gift. It's an amazing power. And we have free will to use that power in a way that's going to be helpful for us and other people, or in a way that's going to not serve us well. So I had an enormous effect from that first talk I heard of his. And after the fact, I realized that that effect was relief, enormous, huge relief that came in the physical form of huge tears, big, big tears that were not sad tears. They were more like release and relief, because I had been on myself, not realizing it. I had been on myself so much to make things happen, to make the things happen that I think are supposed to happen. And then, through the years, I would hear things like surrender. Well, again, what does surrender mean? That didn't strike me, because to me, surrendering is a doing. Even allowing has some, I don't know, to me, even the word allowing seems like it's something we're supposed to do. But seeing, in mystery school, we make a big point about, or we talk a lot about, it often comes up in our conversations about how Sid would write seeing in all capital letters. That just seeing and having some understanding that this world is amazing and beneficent. I can't find any better word than that. But for what the human mind, really the human brain, creates, like we have the free will, the ability to create a symphony or create the atom bomb. I mean, that's enormously powerful. But I find that when I use my state of mind as really the most important thing, because, and I'm not always going to be in a great state of mind, but I'm going to be in better state of mind if I don't get upset that I'm not in a great state of mind, right? So we go up and down. But when we go up and down with an understanding that it's coming through us, and it's just where our thinking happens to be in the moment, that's how we are as humans. So it passes a lot quicker. When I don't get down on the fact that I'm having a bad moment, when I don't get anxious about the fact that I'm having a bad moment, it's a moment. It's not an hour. It's not a day or a week or a year, which is what life used to be like before it got remapped. It got remapped is the best way for me to put it. Through understanding, through seeing more what is behind life, that it's amazing. And I work with couples a lot. I work with individuals also, but, and you can certainly see how individuals, once they begin to see more their complaints about the outside world and what the outside world is doing to them, decreases, because there are things in the outside world that we scratch our head and we wonder, how can these things happen? How can these, the terrible things that people are starving and people are at war and people are killing each other and people are killing themselves. I mean, we're not Pollyannas. We know that bad things happen. But if we have a clear mind, we'll see how we can help. How can we help? How can we? And if we can't help, upsetting ourselves is not the answer. It's not going to help them and it's not going to help us see a way to help. So the remapping happens on its own. I mean, that to me is remarkable because, I mean, that's how nature remaps on its own, right? I'm looking outside now at my window and there's a flurry of leaves because it's fall here in Connecticut. And it looks like, the dance of the leaves. Well, nature knows when it's time to drop leaves. It knows when it's time to sprout leaves. It knows when it's time for the first buds of spring to pop out of the ground. How does that work, right? I mean, we can depend upon that. And that's the same force that we can depend upon within each one of us. Wow. Wow. I mean, just having this opportunity to talk about this with you, sends me into a feeling of awe, how fortunate for us. And, yeah, like Sid said, nobody gets through this life without their bumps and bruises. It's a contact sport. Life is a contact sport. Yeah, I had a flood. Second one. And the first one was my fault. Second one was, long story there, but, it got cleaned up. And in fact, insurance paid for basically a new kitchen. Remarkable, right? But this one, somebody was watering a lawn and it had fallen over. The sprinkler fell over and it came through my front window. And I was away. I didn't know this was happening. But that got taken care of too. Stuff happens. And we just see how to take care of it when we're in our right mind. Before I had any understanding of what that meant, or before I even knew that there was such a thing, that every human is equipped with a right mind, wisdom, call it wisdom, call it divine mind, tapping into the ability to tap into infinite intelligence. And, just a little aside, like life, history, even stories I had read in Reader's Digest years ago, I don't even know if that still exists, but will support this understanding. Like I once read in Reader's Digest that this amazing story of the conductor of a train who saw something on the tracks and he didn't know if it was a bag, it looked like it could have been just a bag. And so, if the train ran over a bag, it wouldn't be a big deal. Or could it be a dog? And he tried to put the brakes on, but he could see that the brakes were not going to work in time. And in case it's an animal, he just, well, what was on the tracks got saved. And I'll tell you what was on the tracks in a moment. It's like a little too dramatic to let you know now. Want you to know that this man was interviewed by, I don't remember, a news station or something, or a journalist, and the person interviewing him said, well, how did you know to put your foot out the door and kick this away? And he said, I have no idea. I have no idea how that happened. But that was not something my brain told me to do. I know that much. That was, I don't know, what do you call it? Instinct? He did not know. People wanted to call him a hero. Do you know what that was? And that bag, dog, animal was kicked to the side and not only survived, but there was not a scratch. It was a baby, a human baby. I mean, miracles like this happen all over the place. I'll bet anybody listening to this has an inkling of what I'm talking about, has had some kind of experience like that.